In this study entitled Vulnerability to Natural Shocks, Assessing the Short-Term Impact on Consumption and Poverty of the 2015 flood in Mozambique, I'm going to present the results and the approach conducted by Vincenzo Salvucci of the University of Copenhagen and myself. In 2015, there was a bigger than usual flood. And there was catastrophic assessments of damages by emergency organizations and government. And the pictures below display a little bit what you can see the results of the flood. So what we tried to look at is what were the short-term impacts on households' consumption and poverty levels of this particular flood. The broader objective is to expand literature on economic effects of the natural events in developing countries and also in the light of growing population, changing climate conditions, etc. And the fact that it's not common to be able to observe at the same units before and immediately after a natural event as it was possible in this case. So in January-February 2015, Mozambique, central and northern Mozambique were hit by a big flood. At the same time, there was a survey being conducted, the household survey 2014 and 2015. The first round of that survey happened before the floods in August-November 2014. The second round or second quarter of that survey was actually occurred during and was hit by the flood itself. The third round was not possible to take place, and the fourth round happened after. So notably, the same households were followed, and consumption was measured for these households before in the first quarter and after the flood in the fourth quarter, and therefore it's possible to consider using diff and diff. In this so we adopted this empirical strategy, and although I'm not going to show here, we did control and look for whether the assumption of shared trends applied, and verified that while it doesn't apply to the totality of the country, it does apply if we focus on the provinces that were affected by the flood. And by this we mean provinces where the flood effects were reported, and also other provinces that were up to 500 kilometers from at least up to 500 kilometers from the flood areas. So what we consider to be treatment groups are households that were much closer to the flood areas, so up to 20 kilometers from the flooded area, including the flooded area itself. And what we consider to be for these households, we consider that they were not treated in the first round, they were treated in the fourth round, and basically we are measuring consumption in these two periods for the treated and control. So there's some caveats that we need to bear in mind. We are focusing here on the effects of flood-related shocks on consumption only, and also on related variables, and including poverty consumption. This effect that we're looking at is only a short-run effect, so it's actually by construction we're not picking up bigger effects. So indirect shocks like loss of crop, loss of land for erosion, and loss of assets, etc., would not be necessarily picked up unless they had actually had short-term effects on consumption. We also acknowledge that the short-term effect we measure is a partial effect, and for instance, other aspects that could be conjoined if there was a quicker reaction by the state that would compensate slightly the most affected households, that would reduce the effect of the measured impact of the floods themselves. So what we find is the first results in using the different diff is that the consumption is reduced by about 11 to 17%, depending on what we're looking at. So if we were to look on all provinces, it seemed to be a 8.2%, but as I mentioned before, and showing the paper, we cannot, if applying to all provinces, we are not following the assumption of shared trends between treated and controlled households. But when we look into only affected provinces, and if you go into a deeper and consider only the affected provinces to be households within 200 kilometers, we see an even higher estimated effect. If we run a fixed effects regression, again, we find a significant reduction in log consumption of around 11%. So actually a reduction on consumption of around 11%. If looking into village fixed effects regression, this is still around 10%. And as you can see, also important that we'd like to highlight is that rural households apparently suffered more than average, so around 16.5% reduction due to the floods. When looking into and trying to look into more depth, what we see is that while there seems to be a higher impact on non-food consumption, that actually is within the interval of confidence, the confidence interval of both food consumption and non-food consumption. So one could not actually make an assumption that there is a stronger effect on non-food consumption. What we do find is an estimated increase in poverty of 6.2%. Also, when we look into the effects on non-poor and poor, either consumption poor or multidimensional poor or non-poor, what you do find is that poor households in both, looking into both dimensions of both approaches, show to be more affected than non-poor households. This is also confirmed when we look into quantiles, and we do see that below the median there was a significant negative effect, and actually suggests an increased effect the closer you get to the median, but then a threshold where it stops being, where the flood stops affecting the. I'd also like to share some robustness checks that we conducted. We conducted placebo treatment, basically assuming that groups were actually a little bit farther away from the floods, finding no results, as one would expect. If we were to consider the second quarter instead of the fourth quarter for effects, there's seemingly some indication, but basically because most of the floods actually happened during this, and most of the second quarter round was actually before the floods, we would see less results as we find. We also find that if we look into treatment group, if a treatment group were to be closer to the shock area and not considering those immediately within the flood areas, we do find a significant and stronger effect. And also if we add additional covariates, when we look into distances, we do see that if we consider treated group up to 50 kilometers, it's still strongly significant, and also 70 kilometers. So in terms of conclusions, we find that there was a big flood in 2015. This is not a finding, this is a fact, with huge damages to infrastructures. What we do find is that consumption for households exposed to the flood and up to 40 kilometers reduced significantly in the short term, in the range of 11 to 17%, depending on the specification. We do find comparable results using diff and diff, our household or village fixed effect regressions. Poverty reduction, we find it an increase in poverty reduction of up to 6 percentage points and 10 percentage points in rural areas. Poor households and rural households were actually affected more significantly than the others. What is the importance of these findings? We find they are relevant for policy planning, natural disaster management, and also to ex-ante vulnerability assessment, and this not only in Mozambique. But looking into Mozambique, it's important to notice that the country was hit by two very strong cyclones, Idai and Kenneth, in the first months of 2019, and already was hit by cyclones in 2021. The flooding followed and causing huge damages and death in central and northern regions in all of these cases. Neighboring countries were also hit both by the 2015 flood and by cyclones Idai and Kenneth, and also by some of the cyclones in 2021. This completes our presentation. We look forward for your feedback, and in this session, or if you contact us by these emails. Thank you.